Hi there, this demo is going to showcase how we can use the Actuate Process Designer to create a template that can be applied against your high volume transactional statements to make them accessible for the visually impaired. In order to showcase this, I'm going to use our simple banking statement, and this statement, as you can imagine, has some static information in it, but it also has some dynamic information. So it has statement information, account activity summary, credit summary. Of course, those are fairly static. However, once you get into those individual sections, you can see that there's an account number, which is obviously going to change between statements, dates, balances, and so on. If I go over to the third page here, we can also see that there's a payments table and a charges and credits table. Of course, as more payments are made, this table can grow and shrink as well. So we need to be able to apply a template to know how to make that table grow and shrink, and also be able to mark up the static content further up in the document. If I go into the tag tree here, I can see that this document is not marked up. So if a visually impaired person were to open this up, they're not going to actually be able to read this. However, there are some facilities to automatically make this accessible, but unfortunately those facilities don't necessarily make this the best statement that it could be. So this SF Wealth logo up here at the top might read as image 1234, and then of course top left to bottom right, it's going to read statement information, contact us, account number 4555, customer service, etc., all the way down. So what you want to be able to do is actually section this off into the individual pieces so that an appropriate reading order can be applied to this. Now, in order to showcase what an accessible statement might look like, I already have one over here, and this is ultimately where we want to get to. Is again a statement that looks exactly the same. As a visual person, I can't actually tell that this is accessible for the visually impaired. However, if I go into the tag tree, I can see that there are a number of tags that have been applied to this. And of course, I can go over here and I can see all those tags as well. So I'm just going to minimize this and go into our process designer, which I already have open here, to show the document. So essentially this is an image of the document. I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to show the flow. This flow is going to show how we can take this document, parse it, apply some technology to it, and then of course generate an accessible PDF. It's important to note that this technology has been in the making for about 10 years for a variety of customers, not just for accessible PDF, but for print stream transformation, manipulation, data mining, and whatever else. So you are going to see a lot of other components in here that aren't necessarily for creating this document and making it accessible, but they could be used for the output PDF if you wanted to, such as moving text around on the page, removing text from the page, adding additional text if you wanted to. So to go further into this, some of the parsers that we have available: AFP parser, line data parser, metacode parser, PCL, and PDF. We can make all of those documents accessible just by pushing the parser onto the template here. So in this case, obviously I showed you guys a PDF earlier that we were going to use and make accessible, so I'm just going to use the PDF parser to do that. And essentially how a parser works is it takes the incoming document and it breaks it down into our own internal format, and our own internal format actually has all the information about the document itself. So I can tell you that there are 272 words on here. I can tell you all the individual words. I can tell you the fonts associated with them. I can tell you where on the page they are. I can tell you that there are 5 forms for each of all these images. And of course, I can even tell you that there are 37 graphics, vector graphics for all these individual lines. Not necessarily that important, but what I'm showing you is that what we have here is all of the content on this page in our own internal format, and you can make all of that accessible and apply tags to that if you wanted to, or you can just artifact those individual items. So of course, these vector graphics in here, you probably don't want to mark up. They will be artifacted, but if you wanted to, you could. So the issue with this, obviously, is all we're doing is bringing it into our own internal format. Of course, I can tell you that there are 272 words, but I can't necessarily tell you anything about those words. I just know that they're words on a page. I know that they're images on a page, and so on. So page has no context. Statement has no context. So in the next item in the flow, what I'm going to open up here is the Xenos field technology. And what the Xenos field technology enables us to do is to do exactly what you would expect it to do, which is add context to these individual fields. So if I create a locator here for statement information, I'm now searching for statement information on this page. And if I find that statement information, I know that I have a statement information section. And of course, I know that that statement information section shows up if that statement information locator is found. So of course, if I flip over to the next page, that statement information locator isn't going to be found. Therefore, the statement information section won't be found. Now, within that statement information section, I have some headers and I have some individual fields. Okay, so I've defined these individual fields. I can actually quickly check to see if I'm pulling those properly. So maybe I want to make sure that the locator is working correctly and it's picking up that statement. So I can, without actually running this document through, I can see what's actually going to get marked up on the page. So I can see this header here, I can see the account number, and I can see the statement date. So great, that's all working appropriately. In the beginning, I also mentioned some tables that can grow and shrink. Now I've already set this up prior to creating this demo, but essentially how I set this up is I create two locators, payments and interest charged. So now I know that there is a table that actually exists between payments and interest charged, and that's actually the payments table. So if I go to this payments section, I can actually see that I have a table here. If I look at positioning, I have the top being the payments locator, the bottom being interest charged, and everything in between that's going to be the payments table. So just like before, I can just quickly go over here and I can see the test here. And I can see that payments table is being picked up and 3 rows are being picked up. So what this enables us to do is as the payments table grows and shrinks, it doesn't really matter because all we're doing is just searching for 2 text fields, payments and interest charged, and everything in between that, of course, is going to be the payments table, no matter if it's 10 rows, 1 row, or no rows, actually. So it's entirely up to how the document comes in. So if you can imagine, we set this all up, we've defined all of our fields. The next thing we need to do is actually set up that reading order. So now that we're giving definition to the fields, now we have to set up reading order. We need to add accessible tags and so on. So I'm just going to go into here. I'm going to add this entire document here. Click OK. And now, if you can imagine, top to bottom is how this is going to be read. So page header is going to get read first, account activity section second, payments if this was the 3rd page, and then statement information. Now, of course, we want statement information to be read second, right after page header. So if I just move that up a bit, now that's going to be read second on the page. Furthermore, in the individual section, there are 3 individual fields. I can see little numbers here, 1, 2, 3. That's how it's going to be read out. Again, just as before, top to bottom is how it's going to be read. So if I want the header to be read last, it can be. Of course, I wouldn't want that, so I'm just going to push that back up. Now with an accessible PDF, just to further talk about this header here, as I'm reading my statement, I kind of peruse over the sections. I look for the headers just to find out where I need to go within the document. The visually impaired do that as well. And in order to do that, we have something called header tags that we can apply to these individual fields so that they can hit a shortcut key and then a dialog pops up and lists all of the header fields within the document so they can quickly fast forward to those. In this particular case, I can label this as H1. So if I'm in the main document, I can hit a shortcut key and I'll get all of the H1 headers. If I go into that individual H1 header, I can get these other headers as well, H2 through H6. So I'm going to label this as H1. I also mentioned this logo up at the top of the page could get called image1234 if this was automatically remediated. However, in this particular case, I want to add maybe some static text to this. So in order to do that, I'll just go into here and choose the alternate text that I want to use. There's 2 options for images, typically either static or provider. In this particular case, I'm going to use static, but a provider would enable us to look in other places in the document to grab text to apply to this image, or maybe go out to a database, or maybe go out to a text file, or even comments within the document itself. Maybe not that important for the SF Wealth logo itself, but if you think about marketing images and things that are going to change month to month, you wouldn't necessarily want to use static because then you have to change this template all the time. Provider would be the best way to go. Again, this is just a quick demo here, so I'm just going to use static. I'm going to put in SF Wealth logo for this image. Click OK, click OK. Another thing I showed you was this account number. I mentioned it could possibly be read out as 4,555. Well, we might want to change that a bit, so I'm just going to go into here, and I'm going to actually choose the formatter alternate text. And what that enables me to do is to actually apply formatting to that field. So I could format a date, I could replace characters in there, maybe I want to replace the dashes with just spaces. But in this particular case, actually, I just want to put spaces in between those numbers, so it'll be read out as 4555 instead of 4,555. Click OK, click OK. And then the last thing I want to show you here is the table itself. Obviously a table, this particular table, it's actually pretty simple, it's only 3 columns. But some tables are 8 columns, so you actually have to define this table so that you know what's actually the column header itself. So I'm going to choose 1. And what this enables us to do is to say, hey, in this first row within here, I know that this actually has the table headings. So as it goes through the table, instead of just going date, description, amount, January 19th, 2008, payment received, 3,200, and so on, all the way through the table, it'll actually apply the table headers to these individual fields. So it'll go date, January 19th, 2008, description, payment received, amount 3,200. Okay, and the last thing I just wanted to quickly point out here was the language. Languages can be applied, I kind of always forget to mention this, but languages can be applied to individual fields within the document, sections within the document, or even the entire document itself. So if you have documents that are English and Spanish and they commingle with one another, you can actually label the Spanish text as Spanish and the English text as English. So I'm just going to save this. You would go through, you would set the reading order for this entire document, and close it out, save it, and now I'm just going to quickly test this, and testing it is basically just going to run through the input document and create an accessible PDF. So what I'm doing is I'm reading a PDF, I'm going to apply this template to it, and then I'm going to write it out. So if I just execute this here, it's going to run fairly quickly here. 406 milliseconds. So if I go over to the result here and I open this up, I'm now going to get that PDF that we saw earlier. It looks exactly like the input PDF, so nothing's really changed, except when I go into this tag tree here, I can see that there are actually tags associated with this. We can see SF Wealth logo up here at the top, which was the alternate text I provided. We can see that these 2 fields have been added in, and we can also see that this table has been created down here. Now if I close out of this and I go into a bigger document, obviously before this demo I created one that actually marked up the entire document. So I'm just going to open this up. Oh, wrong one actually. So I'm just going to open this one up. The only difference between this one and the one that I just showed you, obviously it's the same document. However, now there are more locators to handle all the individual sections. There are more sections here, of course, within this. So there's a statement information section, header, the contact us section, transactions, trans promos, etc. Pretty much all the same, except now obviously reading order is going to be applied to that in the page markup. And now when I run this, we're going to get a fully accessible document finished in 325 milliseconds. If I open this up, now I have this document. Again, it looks exactly the same, only now fields have been applied to everything and tags have been applied to everything throughout the entire document. So that completes the demo. Hopefully this showcased our product fairly well, and of course if you have any questions you can contact us. Thank you.